Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Selling to the CIO podcast. It's been a little while. It's good to have you back. And I have a guest on today who I've been trying to get on the show since probably the inception. Somebody who is very vocal about how us sales reps interact with tech leadership. And I think will give us some good guidance of some of the do's and don'ts of what we should be doing if we're trying to get in front of tech leadership and, ultimately try to build a relationship. So with that being said, I want to introduce Anahi Santiago. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah, I really, I've always seen some of the stuff you post, and it's very, it's funny sometimes, and to the point, and I really appreciate it. So, if you want to give a little bit about your background, Anahi, that would be awesome.
Sure. So, I am the Chief Information Security Officer for Christiana Care. Largest health system in Delaware, also serving New Jersey, Maryland, Pennsylvania. I've been there 9 years in the CISO role. Prior to that, I spent, 10 and a half years at Einstein Healthcare Network in Philadelphia, large health system, as their information security and privacy officer. So almost 20 years in what I'll call cybersecurity privacy leadership.
Oh, that's awesome. And a big Philadelphia sports fans, which is awesome because I don't get to talk sports with many of the tech leadership folks in my network. And you're one who probably knows more than I do. So that's refreshing. So it's pretty cool. So, all right, well, let's get right to it. Tell us some of the things that you do. I mean, listen, you get more calls than anybody from, probably a sales rep a day or probably 10 a day sometimes, just trying to get 15 minutes of your time, so to speak. So what are some of the things that, we'll start with some of the things that how about that you can't stand, and then we'll wrap it up in the end with some of the things that some of the reps should be doing to try to get your attention. So we'll start with some of the we could probably go on all day. So what do you think?
Right. So I will say that on average, I get about 50 to 60 unsolicited emails from vendors, and I'm it's not an exaggeration.
A day?
There are certain days where I count them just for grins and giggles. I delete them. I mean, my if I get carpal tunnel, is from hitting the delete button one too many times. And frankly, even though I'm mostly remote, when I was in the office, I never answered the phone. Nobody calls me. No, I don't get any legit phone calls. So, so what I can't stand is just the volume. What I really, really can't stand is where I actually take the time to respond and say I'm not interested, is I get challenged.
Oh.
What do you mean you don't care about security? Really? Some really incredibly condescending responses. So that's what I can't stand. It's you're now I was polite enough to tell you that I'm not interested.
Yeah.
And now you're going to challenge me on my reasons for not being interested and insult me. Because half the time it's what you don't care about security. Of course I care about security. I just don't have time.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for you guys. Your role, especially, right? Everybody, as a technology company, everybody's being told, go to the security. That's where the money is. That's who has the money. Don't bother the CIO. Go, they have funding. So I would imagine now more than ever, it's just the bombardedness that's coming at you. It's got to be insane. Like you said, 50 to 60 emails a day. I believe it because I get them from companies that are trying to partner with us. It's you just don't know where to turn. And for folks like you who are trying to figure out what's best to breed, it's got to be a very difficult job these days to figure out what technologies are their best, and how do you get some of that information these days?
That's a great question. One of the things that I've actually started doing more and more is talking to venture capitalists and really getting exposure to some of these really cool startups that might have niche functionality that we haven't even dreamt of. And so I've actually started to force myself to become more exposed to technologies because for so long it's just such an adverse reaction to sales outreach that I almost alienated myself from the ability to look at new technologies and new innovative ways of solving problems. And so, conferences are absolutely a way for me to get exposure to vendors and technologies. My team, one of the things that I tell vendors all the time is I'm actually not, even though I write the checks, I'm not making purchasing decisions. I don't choose the technology for my team. So when we have needs, we identify requirements, we put them down, and then I let my team go off and either talk to Gartner, reach out to Health ISAC to see what others are doing in this space, go to conferences and find vendors that you think can meet the requirements. And then we do proof of concepts, we do assessments, but ultimately they make the decision about what's going to make the most sense for them. They're the ones working the tools. It's not me. They don't even want me logging into those admin consoles. So I'm very regimented about not choosing for them.
Interesting. Yeah, you want them to be enabled, right? So they're kind of coming to you, doing some of the homework, and then maybe coming to you with the top 3 recommendations, and you're doing kind of an evaluation that way at the end. Is that when you really step in?
Exactly.
Makes sense.
They come to me. I make sure that the requirements are well vetted so that they're going down the right path. And after that, they generally come back to me with those top 3. They choose which ones they want to do proof of concepts with, and then they'll come back with a final decision on what they want, why they want it. And unless something's egregious, which it never is, I write the check.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting to know. So leave Anahi alone. Go to her team. Right?
I certainly, my team's busy enough as it is.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to point people to my team. Don't want to pile on, but ultimately I empower them to make decisions about what's going to make the most sense.
Yeah, that's great. I got to imagine too, in this day and age, as a CISO, there's some of this, I've heard some of the stuff where you could potentially be personally liable for some of the decisions you make potentially. And I got to imagine to be bleeding edge in your role is probably a little bit frowned upon. I mean, you got to make sure some of the technology you're deploying is, there's money behind it. There's big services organization. You're betting your career in some cases behind it, right? I don't know if you have any, thoughts on that.
So I think I shouldn't say I'm in a unique situation, but I work for an organization that is highly innovative.
Yep. That's for sure.
That really wants to deliver care through the adoption of technology and digital means. And so that mentality has created a culture of embrace, fail fast, but don't just move on because something hasn't been tried and proven. If we think that there's going to be value in it. And so that's one of the reasons that I've started talking to VC companies. It's because that's where that innovation and the unique solutions are coming from. And I'm actually in the middle of 2 design partnerships with 2 stealth companies. Well, at the time, they were stealth companies that were just emerging that I happened to get exposed to while in Israel at Cyber Week. And I saw a lot of potential value. One of them is a free design partnership, so I'm getting access to the solution and co-designing the use cases. Wow. And the other one I got for pennies on the dollar for a couple-year deal where we're, again, working through use cases, and I'm sharing with them what I think, what I would want to see in the solution. And there've been great experiences. So we don't shy away from things that we haven't seen in the market before that we think might add value. And if they fail, they fail. I'm not throwing a lot of money at them. So if it's my time that is what's at risk, I'm okay with it as long as I think that there's value.
Wow. I would say that's unique. If you talk to somebody, I don't know I'm sure you talk to a lot of your peers. I can't imagine that's across the board like that. From some of the folks I've talked to, they're somewhat nervous in your role to make some of these decisions because, the board's going to come there. Your job's to keep the company safe, right? A lot of these folks are very scared to go anything with that hasn't been, tested and it's been proven. So that's awesome. You're lucky that your leadership gives you that capability to do some of that. That's really terrific.
What's regimen, right? I'm not buying startups firewalls or
yeah, okay.
Some of the most important components of our security portfolio are certainly not things that I'm just winging. But in these other, in the more niche use cases, is where I'm really focused on the new innovative things.
Yeah.
And my platforms are still the big names, the tried and true things that I can hang my hat on, so it's a good mix.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's awesome. That gives the little guys a chance, which is really awesome. All right, I'll switch gears a little bit because, believe it or not, we're this 11 minutes has gone quick so far. But I want to. Can you give some advice out there to some of the sales reps that what is the best way to engage with somebody like you or your team for that matter? Maybe it's not even you, like you said, you enable your team to make decisions. So maybe the sales reps in this community are focusing on the wrong people. So maybe some thoughts on what's the right way to do it? If you have any thoughts on that, that would be awesome.
Build relationships. And that, that is at the core of it. I've met some incredible partners where it took years before we were able to do a deal, but they kept the relationship, they retained them. And when the time came, we did the deal. I have one relationship that I've had for, over a decade. I've never bought anything from him because he just doesn't sell security products.
Yeah.
But man, if I see a peer that has a need that aligns with what he is selling, I will make the connection immediately. Because it's all about the relationship. So my recommendation is invest. Everybody wants to make the deal, but deals take time. And where do I meet these people? I meet them at conferences. I meet them at dinner. If I see a face, to a name, I am much more open to a conversation than if it's just this cold email without a face, without a knowledge of who the person is on the other end. So it's really about relationships, and that goes for my team too. If you're going to reach out to my team, add value. Don't just launch an email or a phone call across the web. That's not going to land anywhere. But if they see value in investing the time, they'll make the time.
Yeah, and it's hard these days because, right, you'll see these reps, and I see it all the time. I interview a lot of them. They're jumping from place to place. They're there 6 months, they're there a year. The company that they go to doesn't give them the time to build those relationships. And I always tell people, whether they come to my company or another, I said, just make sure you go somewhere that's willing to give you the time and to build the relationships like you just said, because it's hard. Like you said, it takes years sometimes. And I always encourage the team to join organizations where you're not selling, you're building, it's a way to get to the tech leadership in a different way than versus sending them an email or placing a phone call, which 9.9 times out of 10 does not work these days. You got to do it a different way. You got to be creative about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hopefully you have some sympathy for the sales rep side of the house. It's
100%. Yeah. And that's, I try to be really honest with them. If there's no interest, I let them know no interest. If there's not a fit, I let them know it's just not a fit. And if it's not now, I give them a timeline for when the timing is right. And sometimes that timing gets pushed. I just responded to a message from a vendor who I said, in July, we'll be ready to start to think about X. Guess what? July's here. I'm not ready. So I pushed them off to August, September. But the reality of it is I do want to have a conversation. It's just that the timing just, I thought July was a great idea, and then I realized everybody's on vacation in July, so doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But I do have sympathy. It's hard. It's hard on both ends, and if I can be honest and forthright, I prioritize that as opposed to stringing somebody along or just going dark on them after showing initial interest.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great feedback. I think honesty is all we can ask for these days, right? Just lay it out, just lay it out the way you just said it. It's we as on being on the other side, we can't ask for more than just the honesty factor, right? It is what it is. And hopefully the problem is some people just, they need to accept it. And that's sometimes the hard part, right?
And some don't. I can name, I won't name a few, but I can name a few that just won't listen.
And then they try to call your boss, to go around you, and that's got to be aggravating as well, I would imagine sometimes too.
He has less patience than I do.
Yes, I can imagine. Yeah, absolutely. Well, believe it or not, we're up against it. This was a great conversation. I know I've been trying to get you on here for a long time. You're one of the most well-respected tech leaderships, at least in this area. So I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you can leave these folks with, or that you want to say that that might make sense for everybody out there listening?
Honestly, not to beat a dead horse, but it really is about relationship.
Yeah.
If you can get out and put your name to a face, it's a lot more, it's helpful in being able to make, bridge the gap.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time today. I really appreciate everything that you do. And I appreciate you being vocal out there to the sales community, because it's what we need to hear, really. We got to do it the right way, and there is a right way to do things. So I really appreciate, again, being on here and everything that you do for us.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. Talk soon.